In December 2025, Russia abruptly ended all military cooperation with 11 NATO members and partners, marking a decisive break with the post-Cold War security order. This move erases decades of dialogue and transparency, replacing fragile engagement with open hostility. The agreements once served as guardrails, preventing misunderstandings between powerful militaries operating in close proximity. Their termination signals Moscow's intent to isolate itself from the West, heightening the risk of miscalculation and confrontation. The decision is a direct response to Western support for Ukraine and sanctions against Russia, formalizing a divide that's been growing for years. Without these agreements, routine military exchanges and communication vanish, increasing the danger of incidents spiraling out of control. Europe now faces a new, more dangerous era, with the risk of direct conflict between Russia and NATO at its highest since the Cold War. After the Soviet Union's collapse, military cooperation agreements between Russia and the West symbolized hope for a new, inclusive European security order. Signed in the 1990s and early 2000s, these pacts enabled joint exercises, information sharing, and direct communication to reduce risks and prevent crises. They were practical tools for managing tensions, ensuring that encounters between NATO and Russian forces didn't escalate. Over time, the spirit of these agreements faded, especially after Russia's actions in Georgia and Crimea. NATO suspended most cooperation, but the bilateral treaties lingered as dormant reminders of a more optimistic era. Now, Russia's formal termination of these pacts signals it sees no path back to partnership. The door to post-Cold War security cooperation has slammed shut. Europe is left without the safety mechanisms that once kept peace possible. The Kremlin justifies its move by citing the unfriendly policies of the targeted nations, primarily their military and financial support for Ukraine. Moscow views Western aid to Kyiv as a proxy war and sees sanctions as economic warfare. By ending military ties, Russia is retaliating against those it blames for its isolation. The Kremlin argues that the agreements are obsolete in a world where partnership with the West is no longer possible. This is less about aggression and more about acknowledging a new era of confrontation. Domestically, it reinforces the narrative of a besieged Russia. Internationally, it signals defiance and a willingness to act unilaterally. Russia is making clear it will no longer pretend cooperation is possible with countries it now labels adversaries. Russia's decision targets a mix of major NATO powers and Eastern European states, UK, Poland, the Baltics and others, plus key partners like Ukraine and Montenegro. For Western powers, the loss is mainly diplomatic, the end of formal channels for military dialogue and deconfliction. For Eastern European countries, the impact is immediate and severe. Many still rely on Russian-made military equipment, jets, tanks, air defenses, and now lose access to spare parts, maintenance, and technical support. This forces them to accelerate the shift to NATO standard systems, creating short-term vulnerabilities on NATO's eastern flank. The move weaponizes logistics, turning maintenance into a security risk. These countries must now scramble for alternatives or risk grounding critical equipment. Moscow's aim: impose direct costs on those most supportive of Ukraine and most critical of Russian policy. With these agreements gone, Europe's security is now defined by a tense military standoff, with almost no official channels to manage risks. NATO has responded by reinforcing its eastern flank, deploying more troops, and increasing readiness. Allies have pledged to boost defense spending and institutionalize long-term support for Ukraine. The NATO-Ukraine Council gives Kyiv a stronger voice, deepening its integration with the alliance, but the paradox is clear. Two heavily armed blocs face off with minimal communication, raising the risk of accidental escalation. A single incident, a jet buzzing a warship, a radar glitch, could now spiral rapidly. The safety net of dialogue is gone, leaving Europe's peace dependent on restraint and luck. The continent stands on a knife's edge, with the old rules of crisis management erased. The end of these agreements isn't just a European problem, it raises the risk of direct conflict between nuclear-armed Russia and NATO, threatening global security. For citizens in frontline states, the threat feels immediate, fueling anxiety and diverting resources from social needs to defense. Globally, the move deepens divisions, making cooperation on issues like climate change and pandemics even harder. The breakdown of dialogue and trust harms everyone, as global challenges require unity, not confrontation. This is a stark reminder that peace is fragile and must be actively maintained. The world is shifting from rules and cooperation to raw power and suspicion. The silence from defunct military hotlines is a warning. The risks of miscalculation have never been higher.